And there were thousands of salmon that were backed up. They couldn't get past the dam. They were going up to spawn. And then came back, went to that same Fish Trap Creek area where my family grew up, and the fish were pretty well gone. All those big runs I remembered were kind of gone.
Is Bigfoot real? Welcome to Origin to Impact. This is where we talk with leaders in business, politics, and faith about those moments that shape them and the impact they're making today because of it. I'm Brad Kelly. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Well, thank you for joining me today, Mr. Kredit. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, my name is Harlan Kredit. I am 86 years old. I've been teaching for about over 60 years. The host here was a student of mine at one point in time. I've lived in Michigan for 12 years plus 4, going to school there. Came back here in 1974 to my home community, and I've been teaching at Lynden Christian and associated with the school pretty much ever since. Summertime, I work as a park ranger in Yellowstone. I'm going back for summer number 54.
Wow.
And in a short period of time, and I don't know if that's enough. I have 3 children. All live in the community here with their spouses and their children. So I'm a happy camper.
Now, I'm just going to go a few through some of these awards that you've gotten over time. I had to actually do some stuff on the internet to find them all. Okay, so in 1987, you got the Washington State Department of Fisheries Governor's Award. In 94, you got the Washington State Conservation Teacher of the Year. Again in 94, Northwest State Regional Conservation Teacher of the Year. National Secondary Conservation Teacher of the Year. In 95, you got Washington State Environmental Educator of the Year. Also in 95, National Educator of the Year, Safari Club International. In 97, you got this Distinguished Alumni Award from Calvin College. In 2000, Adopt a Stream Streamkeeper of the Year. 2002, Washington State Department of Ecology Environmental Excellence Award. Again in 2002, Conservation Fund National Environmental Education Award. In 2003, Washington State Secondary Science Teacher of the Year. 2004, Washington State Conservation Teacher of the Year. Also in 2004, the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science Teaching. 2005, Disney Teacher Award. And 2007, Field and Stream Magazine Hero of Conservation. And then in just this year, another month, you're going to be inducted into the WIAA, which is the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association Hall of Fame. Is there anything I missed?
Well, there are a few others, but that's okay. No, that's okay. I've been very blessed. I've had the honor of working in a good school system. And the kids I work with, for the most part, are very forthcoming. Just literally an hour ago, I was at school and I was walking past a history classroom, heading out to the athletic field, and the teacher called through an open door, "Come in here once, Mr. Kredit, come in here." So asked me to give a little talk on the Jim Crow era. They're studying history, American history. And those kids were very receptive. There was like 24, 25 of them in the class, something like that. So I've been very blessed, and I'm just very thankful for the chances I still have to work with kids. I'm a kids guy. I've worked in Yellowstone for 53 summers already. That's been great. I got some very nice awards there too, which you didn't mention, but that's no here nor there. There's a lot of teaching going on there too, but I would want to be remembered more for my teaching experiences, interacting with kids, than probably anything else.
Okay, so I want to go back to the beginning on what happened that made you want to get into sciences and be a science teacher?
That's a very fair question. And I have a very specific answer to that. Growing up, I spent a lot of time outdoors. I had 5 sisters, and so being in the house with a number of those things, I just felt more comfortable being outside a lot. And so I had some very good friends who did the same thing. One of them was the principal superintendent of Lynden Christian School. His name was Bernard Copes. He had a son by the name of Barry Copes, who was my same age as myself. And his dad loved to climb and hike in the mountains. And so often on Saturdays, he would take Barry and myself, maybe other kids as well, on a hike up in the mountains. And one day, when I was either in the 5th or 6th grade, he decided to take us up Church Mountain in the Mountain Baker National Forest area. And so we hiked up there, and it's a pretty skookum hike. It's a pretty difficult hike in a lot of ways. It's up about 4,000 or 5,000 feet, but halfway up, you get to a gigantic meadow, kind of at the timberline. And as I stepped out of those trees, he says, "Look, there's a bear." And I saw this bear eating blueberries way up at the edge of this meadow. And that just resonated with me. I want to be a biology teacher. And in the Lord's plan, that's what's happened. So I've always been a curious person. I want to know how things work. And science is based on that in a lot of ways. So I've had a chance to pursue this dream of mine since I was a 5th or 6th grader for over 60 years. But that's kind of how it works. I try to cultivate within my students a sense of curiosity. For some, it's natural. Others, it's not. And I'm the kind of person that if I'm driving, and my wife would tell you this, driving along a freeway somewhere or some country road, it says, well, there's a historical spot ahead. My car automatically goes in that historical spot, no matter whether I steer it in there or not. So, and it's like the kids would say, "Oh, there's another one," and they'd try to distract me about something on the left side of the road because they saw it on the right side. They knew I was going to stop at that one too. But I just want.
Look, Dad, there's a bear.
I know. I wonder how things work. I've always been curious, and so my dad had a hardware store here in town, Kredit and Eward, now Deward and Bodie. And anyway, I started working for him at a pretty early age, and we would take apart televisions and washers and dryers and fix these things. And so I've always been a curious person. I just want to know how things work, and that's kind of the foundation of science. I want my kids to just wonder about something, because if you don't have any sense of curiosity, why would you care? I want them to drive around the room and see stuff. The curious person, what was that animal? What was that plant? What was that bird? What does that sound like? And so I've been blessed to be able to be in a profession where I can promote that and work with kids on a daily basis to try to increase their repertoire of curiosity. If I could develop one pill in the world, it would be a curiosity pill, and I would give every student that pill. My little favorite story about that is that the first day of class, and maybe you remember that the first day of your class. I did it most of the time. So I asked the kids this question. So there is a cup upside down on the front of my desk. There's a sign that says on there, "Do not touch." The number 1 people will walk in the door and look at that sign and just ignore it and sit down and start talking until the class starts. The number 2 type kids will come in and they'll look at that. And they're a little curious. That's interesting. Why am I not supposed to touch this cup? It wasn't here yesterday. But they'll sit down and start to talk about it before the class starts. The number 3 kids will walk in that door and see that sign.
And be like, what the heck is our sign?
Well, if I'm not there, they'll shake it, they'll hit it, they'll listen to it. They might even open it up and put it down real quickly and then look outside to see if he's coming or not. Or if they don't dare because they think something's going to come out of there, they'll stand right there until I get in the room and say, "Why can I not touch this cup? What's so special about this?" Those are the number 3s. So my goal always in my classes is to get everybody to be a number 3. And today, 50 years later, I can be walking down the street, and often kids will say to me, "Hey," now they're adults. Their children are maybe in school because I'm in the 3rd generation already. I'm still a number 3. Then that to me is one of the highest compliments. So the curiosity related to the science part, it goes back a long ways with me. It's in my genetics.
And you're still teaching.
I'm not on a regular basis. I'm at school every day. I'm subbing. I subbed last week a couple of different classes. And I'm more classes coming up. So I'm at school all the time. Yeah, I just enjoy hanging out with the kids. I'm doing a lot of supervision of athletic events. I was the athletic director for 30 years as well as a science teacher. So I'm supervising a lot of athletic events in the evening or after school. And next week we start our track program again. So I'll be coaching track again this spring. So I try to stay involved, and it keeps me going. I'm only 86, so I have to decide what I'm going to do when I grow up, and I'm working on it.
And I'll just never forget being in your class as a high schooler. I think maybe it was senior biology. What was one of the ones before senior biology?
Well, sophomore biology, and then earth science for seniors and senior biology.
Maybe it was earth science,
yeah.
And you showed us how you could draw a perfect circle on a chalkboard. I'll never forget that. And we all loved getting you on a rabbit trail, too.
I can still do that.
It was crazy how much we learned. But one thing that was really neat is being a part of the whole fish hatchery there at Lynden Christian.
Well,
and you were in charge of that from its inception, correct?
So there's an interesting kind of story behind that. As far as I love to fish. My mother loved to fish. My dad loved to fish, and taking them out in Yellowstone Lake a long time ago before they passed away and a little boat out there was so much fun. So I loved fish, and I remember very distinctly one day when I was probably the 4th, 5th, 6th grade, something like that, coming home from school. I had to walk home from school that particular day, and I crossed the Fish Trap Creek on West Main Street in Lynden. And that day, I looked over the edge of the bridge, and I saw some people that were working on what appeared to be as a big beaver dam right alongside of the road there, just a short distance from the bridge. And I could see fish behind the beaver dam. So I went behind. I forgot I was supposed to be going home, and I had pretty good clothes on, which I got pretty dirty. But anyway, I climbed down there and went and I asked, "What are you guys doing?" You know, I'm a 4th grader now, and they told me, well, we're going to blow the part of the dam out of here because you see all these fish behind here can't come up. Really? So how many were there? So I started walking downstream to the blackberries and so on. And I recall, maybe it's exaggerated a little bit in my mind, but I went a block or so, and there were thousands of salmon that were backed up. They couldn't get past the dam. They were going up to spawn.
Wow.
And I just so distinctive. It was just full of them. Of course, it's called the Fish Trap Creek because Phoebe Judson already in the 1880s is the one who founded Lynden, and they called that the Fish Trap Creek because there was a trap on it, not very far away from there. So anyway, I watched them blow that dam out, or at least a hole in there. And then they left, and I crawled out of that dam because they only blew a hole of, I'd say, 3-4 feet wide in there. And anyway, the salmon were just flying through that hole, jumping through. I could touch them. Big fish. I was very late when I got home that night. My mother was going, well, I'll tell you what I was doing. I was watching big fish jump through a hole that blew a dynamite into this beaver dam, So I was excited about it. Well, anyway, every year, we lived on the creek just a short distance away from there. We'd watch these fish come up. So that was just part of my growing up. Then I went to college, came and taught in Michigan for 11 years, and then came back, went to that same Fish Trap Creek area where my family had grown up, and the fish were pretty well gone. All those big runs I remembered were kind of gone. And I was thinking, well, there's something I'd really like to work on, because my master's degree was in how salmon smell their way back to where they originally were hatched. Okay. And so there was a kind of a tie in there. So I talked to my high school principal about it, and he was very enthusiastic. How about if we build a hatchery right along the edge of the creek on our own property. And we can try to restore these runs, but more than that, we can teach kids how to take care of things, like take care of these fish and feed them 5 times a day and whatever. So we started a very primitive hatchery, kind of started with a big blue swimming pool, which didn't work very well. And we progressed into what we have now is a big, long tank, cement tank that holds about 3,000 gallons. We have a backup generators, and it's enclosed in a building. But for about 40 years now, we've been doing this. At least 50,000 salmon every year, sometimes 100,000. We just got 60,000 for this year, just a week or so ago, the early part of February. And so I'm still very much involved, and I'm turning that over as best I can to the biology teacher who pretty much took my place. Great fellow to work with. So we're working together, but we have to feed those fish 5 times a day, 7 days a week, and we'll release them maybe in a couple of months. So, and this past, it's kind of exciting, this past fall of 2025, a lot of people start calling me and says, Harlan, there's fish in the creek. There's a lot of salmon coming back. And this year was a big year for salmon returns. A lot of those, I think, were fish that we planted 3 years ago, because their life cycle is the coho salmon, the silver salmon, which is a common one in the creek here.
And that's the one that you...
That's what we work with.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what happens is they spend 1 year in fresh water, 2 years in salt water, and then come back. And so that would have been 3 years ago. So we think the class of 2023, those are the fish that they worked with. So we don't have them tagged, but we pretty much assume that. So this year was a great year. So I love these. The kids get excited about it. They're very careful about it. They want to take good care of those fish. They have a vested interest. I want kids to own something, and you own it by being a part of making it work. Mm-hmm. Some of the very best tools I have are 28 shovels, because every year we plant maybe 500, 800 plants along the Fish Trap Creek somewhere. We've had literally 20, 30 projects along the creek, all with the idea of returning these salmon runs to what they were before we took a lot of trees off the banks and et cetera. So, and everybody's been helpful, the Rotary clubs, the Kiwanis clubs, the community. Everybody wants more fish back. So
when did the fish start coming back?
Well, it depends what species it is.
Okay.
The coho salmon start to come back in generally in September, late September. A few of them it has to rain first. There has to be more water in the creek, because these fish smell their way back, and they hang at the intersection of the Fish Trap and the Nooksack River. And when you get a flush of water, like a rainstorm, it flushes in some of the minerals on the bank along the side of the creek and the Fish Trap. They smell that, and they smell their way up. And so they typically will wait until we get a pretty good burst of rain. So if it's a real dry September, October, they might not come up. They'll come up a little bit later.
Oh.
But they come up kind of in groups. So, yeah.
So when did you start seeing the salmon come back after you started the
Well, we've seen them
hatchery?
come back over quite a period of time, Brad, but this year particularly was a very, very high number.
Is there a reason for
Well,
that?
the reason probably is most biologists would tell you that it's because of ocean conditions. Because of the climate or whatever, movement of water currents. There was a lot of feed out there, a lot of shrimp and so on, which is what they eat. Many of those fish eat shrimp. And if the ocean conditions are really good, the survival rate is going to be higher out in the ocean, which means it's going to be higher coming up the stream. So it's a pretty complex thing. There's no one simple answer. But I don't want that hatchery, the value of the hatchery, to be determined by how many fish come back. I think as teachers, in my case particularly, I want the kids to learn how to take care of something. I want them to have some vested interest in it. If you don't own it, you don't take care of it. I mean, and so that's really, really important to me. I consider myself an outdoor teacher in a lot of ways. You can talk about a lot of stuff in class. You can talk about why you need to plant things in class, but give yourself a shovel and actually do it. And so I'm sure there's a lot of kids, and you help with some of that planting as well. They can drive around the community here, and they can see trees they planted 40 years ago that are really big and high. and they kind of own that. I helped plant that section. That's part of what I did. That's why we did the Adopt a Highway cleaning thing for about 25 years, because that's along the roadways and a lot of that area, the ditches drain into the creek. It's, if you have to pick up litter alongside the road, you're probably not as likely to throw something along the road yourself. Yeah. So,
yeah, I don't remember doing planting anything, but we did the where we painted by the storm drains.
Oh yeah,
this drains into a fish stream or
there's still around those today. We took every storm drain in the city of Lynden and put a decal on it and painted that. And there are signs at each creek crossing in Lynden area, blue and white signs that says this stream is in your hands, with a picture of a salmon. Those were made out of aluminum signs, and they look as good as the day we put them up there 35 years ago, whenever that was. Yeah. So. Perfect.
So I want to get into you as a Yellowstone Park ranger, because that's well. So how did you get into doing that too?
Well, I finished it. So I went to Lynden Christian High School, moved here with my parents when I was 6 years old. My parents grew up in South Dakota. Moved here when I was 6. My dad started a hardware store here, and so I went to high school here, grade school and high school here. Went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan for my 4 years there. And then I student taught in a place called Unity Christian High School about 12 miles from the college. And I really enjoyed that a lot. I just got along very well with the cooperating teacher, and to the point that when I finished my term, they said, "Harlan, we want you to teach here." And so they offered me a contract, so I taught there for 11 years. And during some of those summers, I finished my master's degree at William & Mary in Virginia. And so when we were done with this, and I married and met my wife in college there, got married in 1965. And so when I finished all my degree stuff, we were driving back from our home here in Washington back to school in Michigan, where I was going to be teaching again. And we drove through Yellowstone Park. And my wife liked camping, and her parents did the same thing, and so she liked national parks. So we started talking about, how about if we started to work here? How would that work? So we eventually applied and was accepted and never left.
And what year was that?
So it was in 1971 was my first year. So my children it's all they ever knew was growing up in Yellowstone Park. We had a little cabin, the only cabin on Yellowstone Lake, right next to the water itself, about 100 feet away. Had a boat there. Kids loved it. And all three of them eventually worked for the park for a little while. One of my daughters, I have 2 daughters and a son. My youngest daughter has just finished 25 years working for Yellowstone in the summertime. She's a librarian in her other life. She met her husband there. And so and they were married, and then their 3 children have also, that's all they know is working in the park in the summertime. So this coming summer, Lord willing, what's going to happen is my 2 granddaughters, one's a freshman, one's a junior in school, they're going to be volunteering in our visitor center. And my grandson, who's a freshman in college now, is hoping to work for the gas station in Yellowstone. So it's in the
it's kind of a family thing.
It's a third generation. In fact, we had an interesting thing this past summer. I work as a park ranger out of the Fishing Bridge area in the park on Yellowstone Lake, and I was leading a nature walk, and 20, 30 people with me or whatever. And we're just about done with the walk. It was a 2-hour walk, and we're just getting close back to the road again where our car was. And I was just kind of talking to the people and thanking them for going along and so on. And then in my park radio, a call came in, and my granddaughter was with me. She says, "Hey, Grandpa, my dad needs help down the road." Oh, her father, my son-in-law, is a law enforcement park ranger, and he was on duty. It's a government car. And so we quickly jumped in my car and drove to where the accident scene was. And it was no one was seriously injured, but the car, everything was damaged pretty badly. But anyway, he said, "I need help out here because the other rangers are a long ways away, so can you help us out?" So my granddaughter went on one end of the accident with a stop-go sign, and I was on the other end. And my son-in-law was doing the law enforcement part in the middle, investigating the accident. So I thought to myself, this is interesting. I don't know if this has ever happened before. So we have 3 generations working at a traffic accident. My granddaughter's on the far end, I'm on my end, and my son-in-law's in the middle. And so it's been a it's been a great experience. I always go to the same place, but we do a lot of different things in the park. I don't never get bored of working at the same place, but because our days off, we do a lot of hiking and climbing. And the kids just
you were based out of the Fishing Bridge.
Oh, the whole time.
Yeah, and I remember one summer we came to visit, and Tim and I were doing stuff, and I'll just never forget my dad telling this story where you drove up to the cabin and said, "Hey, Steve, get in the truck," and you guys took off, and my dad's like, "Oh, so what are we gonna do?" And you're like, "We're gonna watch bears mate."
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, curl up in a ball if we get into trouble with the grizzly bear.
I've been asked that often if I've ever been in trouble with grizzly bears, and I've been a couple of times. I've been in a situation that were kind of difficult to get out of, but I got out of it. But I see bears almost every day, and almost wolves every day too. We had moose right outside our window of our little cabin there, and of course, bison, we've got 5,000 bison. They're all over the place. They rub against the side of the trailer. I have marks on my truck where bison have rubbed against it when I was parked near a building, and they went between the truck and the building and rubbed both sides. But it's always been a challenge. And the neat part about that is that I get to work with people from all over the country that are fellow rangers. But in addition to that, the visitors come from every country in the world, speaking every language possible. So every day that I'm working at the visitor centers, that's what my duty is that day, I will hear literally all different kind of languages and talk to people from every continent. So it's just a great, mind-opening experience to see people from all over with many different kind of backgrounds, and try to interpret the park to them so they'll understand the importance of maintaining these natural areas for not just our generation, but future generations.
Well, Yellowstone was the first national park.
First national park, March 1, 1872.
Who put that in? Was it
that was President Grant.
Oh, okay.
1872. That's the first one. Yeah, that's and we have our.
But wasn't it Teddy Roosevelt that did something?
Teddy Roosevelt in the early 1900s, about 1901, 1905, etc. When he was president, he set aside a whole lot of western areas in national forests. He visited Yellowstone Park.
Okay.
He visited it, but definitely he is responsible for most of the national forest land that we have in the western United States. He looked down the road far enough and said, we need to preserve or use these lands wisely for future generations. So we've got about 400 units of the park system right now. And I visited many of those, almost all the big ones in the United States. 48, and we also went to some in Alaska and some in Hawaii. But it's one of the best ideas we've ever had in this country. But the challenge is a big challenge, is how to take care of that resource, because people are literally loving it to death. We have 4 million people have come the last couple of years. And our staff has been reduced somewhat now. And for us to take care of 4 million people, it's really difficult because they all bring different perspectives to it. Some people come from areas in which national parks, you don't have to be as careful. Maybe you think it's okay to throw pennies in a wishing well some other country, but don't throw them in Old Faithful Geyser or some of the hot springs. And so there's a big education component of that, and that's hard sometimes. People get way too close to the animals deliberately, even occasionally feeding them, which is one of the worst things you can possibly do. So again, it's science stuff. And a lot of my students come. This past year, I was there this past summer, only 1 week, and nine seniors of last year came out and visited for a couple of days, stayed in a big tent. This year, 6 boys came up to me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, we're going to come to visit you in Yellowstone. So right after graduation, I have 6 more people there. And I think I've had half of Lynden there at one point in time.
Okay, so it was back in, was it 1988, the big forest fire in Yellowstone?
1988.
Yeah, what was that like being a ranger there? And because I was working on a ranch kind of by Fort Washakie that summer. And I could have had the opportunity of going up there and fighting the fire because they were desperate for, anybody with a shovel and stuff.
Sure.
But anyway, what was that like?
1988 was a really tough summer, no question about it. It started out pretty normally. The weather was not different than it typically was. We didn't think too seriously about we were going to have a big issue. And then all of a sudden, essentially, we ran into 2 months of no rain. And we had over 50 fires that summer. Most of them were caused by lightning, but some of the very biggest ones, the one that went past Old Faithful, was caused by man. People did that. Some of the bigger ones, some of the bigger ones in terms of area, were done by actually started by people accidentally. But it was tough. So we had to work 7 days a week. I worked 5 days working at our visitor center and so on, giving talks and whatever. And then we'd be assigned to go wherever around the park. There's 5 entrances to the park. One time we only had one of them open, with the entrance to the Tetons closed almost all the summer because the fire went right across the road there. But it was just a very smoky, difficult time. And we didn't close the park down because people from all over the world had reservations there, and that's so you try to let them have some kind of experience rather than just saying, let's shut it all down. And the fire also was burning in the National Forest. Some of the fires went from the National Forest into the park, or from the park out to the National Forest, because Yellowstone is surrounded by 5 national forests. So it was an amazing thing. I remember the day I left, I'm backing up a little bit, the day the fire cut the road at Old Faithful was the day that I was assigned with a couple of other people to stop cars that were going to try to go across the pass to the Old Faithful area when we were told they had to. So I can remember this. The fire was coming from the south and the road was going from east to west, so it was going to cross the road. Had helicopters up in the air. We had radio contact with them. And we had a long line of cars that were trying to get across this pass to the Old Faithful area before the fire cut the road off. Because if they didn't do that, they'd have to go 2.5 hours around the other direction. But the visitors were not aware how close the fire was to actually being on that road. So we'd help with these cars. They'd come up. I'm very kind to people all the time. I really tried hard to do that. But this time, I had to be a little bit more stern and say, just go, just keep going. Because every time I stopped a car, they asked questions. 2 or 3 cars would never make it through and had to go, 2 hours around the other way. So I just got to keep moving. And finally, helicopter over to the bus, shut it down, it's coming across. So we put a big barricade, picked the last car, go, and then stop the rest of it. Put a barricade there. Went up the road a couple hundred feet, just kind of right around a corner, took my camera out. We're listening to the helicopter pilot up above. So it's going to hit in about a minute. And are we safe where we are? Yes, it's going to go right past you, but you're safe where you are. So I just set my camera there ready to go, and I'll never forget that it sounded like the roar of a freight train or just coming down on you, and that fire shot across that road. I got some great pictures of the fire just sheeting across the road. Obviously, that shut down everything. But that was one of the things I really, really remember. It was a tough summer, very, very tough summer. When I left to go back to teaching, that particular day, I couldn't get out 2 entrances, so I had to go way around myself. And I remember looking around at that night before I left, it was fire kind of all around. You could just see in the distance the peaks. They were just burning all the way around. But now today, we look at that and as part of a natural event, fires.
Well, we also treat forest fires differently too. I mean, at one time, didn't we try to put everything out? Well, and then it was just everything just kind of kept piling up in Yellowstone, and then it was just.
Well, that's kind of a complex question about fire policy. Yeah. You could ask it this way. So, before we were there, before people ever were there, how often did it burn? It burned all the time. Fire has been a part of the Rocky Mountains for 10,000 years.
Even the lodgepole pine needs a fire so it can reseed.
It's learned. It has developed a technique, I should say, in a way that it protects its seeds from fire and can start a new generation. So, but when you came in, you're thinking about this around the 1900s. All fire was bad. And so they did everything they could to put fire out. So in a lot of the national forests, fire suppression was the way to go. Now, today, the last 20 years or so, we've learned that that's not necessarily the right thing to do at all. There are some controlled burns, prescribed burns, and et cetera, which keep it the way it always was. Now, if fire is bad in the sense that if your home is burning, obviously no one's questioning that. We've had a lot of brush fires in a lot of places. But if you're trying to keep it in its natural state, and that is said, Congress said that, keep it in its natural state, you can't keep fire out all the time. But on the other hand, we have these big buildings and infrastructure and 4 million people in there in the summertime. And so to decide which fires you let burn and which fires you try to put out is a very tough situation. I'm asked that question all the time in Yellowstone. And my answer simply is it depends. What does it depend on? Well, if it hasn't rained for a long period of time and the forest is really dry, and if the fire is going to blow into buildings or main power lines or whatever, we would tend to put this out more quickly. Or if there's so much fire going around the western United States, because there's an interagency fire team that works in all the western United States, and so all the resources, the professional firefighters and the truck engines and helicopters are all working, let's say, in California or Oregon, and we're in Wyoming, and if things really turn bad, we don't have resources to call them to help us. In that case, we would tend to be more aggressive in putting the fire out. So there's a lot of things that fit into that equation. In the last couple of years around some of the buildings, there's been a lot of tree removal and thinning out trees around some of the buildings so the fire wouldn't be quite as hot and a little bit easier to put out in case it did burn in that area. Yeah, fire ecology is a very complex science. In 1988, we learned there things that totally changed the fire science studies, because we saw that, for instance, when the fire got to the Yellowstone River, you would think a river as big as the Yellowstone River would be a pretty good fire break. Today, people make fire breaks with using bulldozers, clear the land, clear a pathway, and that's supposed to be a fire break. That fire came down to the Yellowstone River, and if the wind's strong enough, it picked up those sparks, just flipped them right across the river, and it just kept on going. And fires weren't supposed to do that. According to the books, they weren't supposed to do that. So there's a lot of changes in fire policy as a result of what we learned in the fires of '88. We have fires every summer. Only had a couple of small ones this past summer, 2025. But fire is natural, and you're at 8,000 feet. The peaks are at 10,500, and these storms come whipping through there. And lodgepole pines, if they're dry, they're going to burn. But when a lodgepole pine burns, it has a certain kind of, it's a big name, it's called a serotinous cone, certain kind of a cone called a serotinous cone. It's a cone that has a lot of resin around it. And older trees have that. And so when the fire goes through, if you put a thermometer in one particular spot on a tree and measured how long the highest temperature was on that thermometer as the fire passed, it'd probably be close to a minute or so. Well, and so the fire keeps on moving. Well, that is just enough to burn that resin off and kick the seed out. And so it falls to the ground and naturally reseeds. So after the fire of 1988, there are literally millions and millions of trees, all the same height, that all were reseeded naturally after that fire. And if we don't plant them at all. I mean, it's a natural.
Yeah, because I noticed that right away when coming back, taking my kids there, and like, wow, it's actually pretty thick.
Oh, well, they start out growing really thick. I mean, they could be like 6 inches apart. Now, 100 years later, some of them are going to be dying out. They're shaded out because the lodgepole pine is a very shade intolerant tree in the sense that as it grows towards the sun, it doesn't do well in the shade. So the lower branches that were shaded out, if they're close together, they all fall off. That's why there's such great telephone poles and fence posts, because they don't have lower branches. They self-prune in that sense. You just have green stuff on the top.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a natural sequence. by the time it's 200 or 300 years old, it's not nearly as dense as it is right after it's planted.
So this is a question I've always had.
Yeah.
Is the bark beetle, is it more of a problem now?
So is it,
Or has it always been an issue, but forest fires would thin those big trees out? Or
Sure. Well, that's a fair question. So we've had beetles around for a long time. If you went to the Old Faithful Inn, which was built in 1900, so that's 125 years old, and you looked at some of the big logs that are inside that building, they have beetle tracks in them. And so there were beetles there already in 1900. But the beetles, like a lot of other things, all of a sudden, if the climate is just right and the food is just right, everything works together, just like the salmon we were talking about, they'll pretty much explode. And that happened about 15 years ago and took out half the lodgepole pine trees in Colorado and over western United States. Just a huge infestation of them.
Well, yeah, because then you see them, they're just dead.
Sure, yeah.
You know.
And so that happened, but now it's not as much anymore. But we could have an infestation again, in another year or 2 or 3. And they're very specific beetles. The beetle that kills the lodgepole pine is a different beetle than kills the white bark pine. They're very specific to a certain kind of a tree. And it's true that the older trees are more susceptible because how the beetle life cycle goes, it lays, punches a hole, it lays its eggs just inside the bark. And a young tree is more vigorous and would have more sap in it and would tend to pitch the eggs out, which older tree would not. Furthermore, if there's not as much water, there isn't as much sap, and so they're affected by drought. So the perfect condition is a lot of old trees in a dry area are really very susceptible to the lodgepole pine beetle, and a lot of those trees already have died. We don't quite understand, there's a lot of things we don't understand about the biology that we're working on it, of course, exactly how those cycles work. For instance, the bear tree, the tree that the bears like so much, is called a white bark pine. And if you took a white bark pine cone and you heated it and measured how many calories are out of there, it's like you need raspberry, strawberry pie, whatever, tremendous amount of food value in one of those. So the grizzly bears, in the fall of the year, they go up and they eat these white bark pine cones. They're just tremendously nutritious. That's how they put on their weight so they can sleep in wintertime. Well, what happens is those white bark pine, when they do that, of course, when you have a lot of them that are killed, then you affect bear populations because their food isn't there. So then they come back down to lower elevations during the fall of the year, have to eat other things. So these cycles with these insects just change all sorts of other things. It's complicated. That's what I like about the biology. There's so much we don't know yet. We're trying to learn so much. The big story in the last 5 or 6 years is called the Trophic Cascade. And what that means is that when I first came to Yellowstone, the elk population was tremendously high because we thought it was the right thing to do to shoot all the wolves in the 1910s and 1920s. So they shot wolves and coyotes and cougars. And so they're pretty much gone by 1930. Well, that's the top predator for the elk. So the elk just exploded. When I came there was maybe 20,000 elk or something. They were just grazing the northern part of the park down to almost nothing. And one of the things they really liked are the trees like willows that grow alongside of the streams. So they were just grazed down to virtually to nothing. Well, when we finally reintroduced the wolves in the mid-1990s, because we realized this was not a natural situation at all to have this many elk there that just don't have enough food, and the general health is decreasing. What happened then is the wolves changed something dramatically, and we found out in the last couple of years what they do. They can change rivers in this sense that now that the wolves are back, the elk population has gone down, so the sides of the streams can replenish and regenerate some of the plants that grew there. And when they grow there, that stops some of the erosion that typically would move streams around. So who would have thought that wolves and elk would change the erosion rates or the channel deposition rates of the streams that flow through the park? And so that's kind of one of the newest areas of study, the long-term effects of reintroducing wolves in the 1990s on stream health.
It's got to be pretty neat. You've been long enough to kind of see all that.
Well, that's the fun part. And honestly, I don't say this in a cocky kind of way at all. It was a surprise to me. A couple of years ago, they had a 50th year party for me. So my whole family came out. There's a couple hundred people. We had a dinner along the shore of Yellowstone Lake one afternoon. The superintendent came over there and he gave me some nice awards and so on. But anyway, he said, well, according to our records, you're the longest serving ranger in the history of Yellowstone Park. And I looked at, really? So I've been here longer than anybody of these 200 people that were around here. I didn't feel that old necessarily. But I have, I guess I have some institutional knowledge in the sense that I've watched that over quite a period of time. Yeah.
So another question about Yellowstone is, when did they figure out that feeding the bears was not a good idea? Because I think it was my mom remembers, as a kid being in Yellowstone, and that's what you just did. You just fed the bears. They'd come up, you'd give them food, and...
So my first summer in Yellowstone, 1971 was my first summer, and at that time, feeding bears was very common. I have pictures of people feeding black bears alongside the road for sure. But we realized then, that was not a smart thing to do. If you're trying to keep people and animals in their natural situation, you don't feed them Oreos and potato chips.
Well, also, wasn't it kind of conditioning generations of bears to...
Well, for sure. Yeah. So these bears would say, why wouldn't I want to sit along the road and beg for potato chips? I could just sit in one spot there. The people will come to me rather than going out and doing some work on my own. Anyway, starting in the late 1960s, a lot of bear research was done. It started by a couple of brothers called the Craighead brothers, PhD folks out of the Grand Teton National Park. They started collaring bears and whatever. And people already believed in the 1910s and 20s and 30s and 40s, up to almost the early 50s, it was okay for bears to eat the garbage that people left. And so if you were there, let's say in the 1940s or so, you would have gone out to the Lake Hotel, or the Canyon Hotel was a big place for that, and you would have watched the night. The cooks would take all the garbage stuff that the people didn't eat or whatever and bring it out to the center of our wildlife valley, the Hayden Valley. Off the road about 3 or 4 miles, they'd drive down there, dump these garbage there. Well, sometimes there'd be 15, 20 grizzly bears out there. Again, eating this. They were conditioned to doing that. And they even had bear feeding stations. You could go from the lake hotel, but particularly the Canyon Hotel, you could go out to a spot there where there were bleachers there. And a ranger would sit there on a horseback, and telling the people, no, don't get too close. They'd watch the bear show at night. And the biggest grizzly is the one who got the most food. But after a while, it was pretty obvious that was absolutely the wrong thing biologically to do. So the big question came, do you close all the dumps just boom at one time, or close it slowly over a period of time? The decision was made to close them all down. I was there when they were all closed at one time. And when that happened, these bears that were conditioned to eating human food, and the food was not in the dump anymore, they covered that all with dirt, they started to go into campgrounds. People were there too and really raided these garbage cans. And so everybody said, this can't happen. So they went through several designs of garbage cans that were bear-proof. And of course, these bears are pretty smart. They learned how to outwit most of them, and they finally came to the same style that we use today. So starting in about 1975, if you were caught feeding a bear, that was a fine. First year, I think they were kind of more like warnings, don't do this again. And then now, so if that happened today, 2025, it's very, very serious. That is a very high level fine or something that we don't want people to do at all. So it doesn't happen very much. So we're in a much more natural situation. The bears are eating what they should be eating. So, and that's not Oreos and potato chips. Yes.
Okay, now I kind of want to move on to some of your hobbies that you've done over the years.
I have a few hobbies.
You're like the most preeminent player piano rebuilder in the Pacific Northwest.
Well,
how did you get into doing that?
Okay, so player pianos. Again, it's a curiosity thing. So when my oldest daughter was like 6 years old, she said, Dad, Mom, I would like to learn how to play the piano. And we were working in Yellowstone that summer. So on a day off, we drove to Billings, Montana to look for a piano. And in the process of this, we coincidentally, really, accidentally, ran into someone, an older gentleman. His name was Hoekstra, his last name, Dutch name anyway. Interesting. He said to me, you know what? You need to learn how to repair player pianos. Nobody does that anymore. That's kind of like a lost art. And he said, there's a lot of player pianos around here that could be repaired. Really? So we bought a player piano in Billings, Montana. It came out of an old saloon there a long time in the 1920s, and took it home. And I got it home, and my daughter started playing with that. And I looked at that and said, this is kind of a complicated mechanism inside here, but the curiosity part of the thing. So I wonder how this thing works. One thing led to another, and I bought one out here, took it all apart. I think I can figure this thing out. So fast forward, I've done maybe 70, 80 of them or something like that, or whatever. But that's how it happens. So I like the challenges of doing that. It's something not many people do anymore. I don't know if there's anybody around that is doing that anymore.
There's probably not a lot of people that know that you do that.
No, I've never advertised any of that at all. The ones I fix now are most like family heirlooms of people. People remember, older folks. Oh, my grandmother used to play this piano. It's part of our family heritage, and so can you rebuild it? And so I've done that over quite a period of time. I like motors and mechanical things. I've rebuilt a 1931 Model A Ford from the bottom up. The booklet says there's 10,000 parts.
Was that the one that you got when I was in high school?
That you got it when you were in high school, and now it's in beautiful shape. Two of my daughters were used in weddings, and yeah, so I have that. I enjoy that. I also started working with bees one summer before. I was working in Michigan before I started working in Yellowstone. I needed a job that summer, so I applied to work in a bee inspection business for the state of Michigan because they have a lot of blueberries. There are a lot of bees. And I remember this very clear. The guy says, well, some people can do it and some people can't. I said, well, how do you tell? He says, here's what you tell. On Saturday morning, you go out with this experienced beekeeper, and he's going to go out to some hives, area people that have hives, apiaries they call them. And he says, and to get the bees a little bit angry, hold your hand in front of the hive, get stung about a dozen times. This is Saturday. Call me on Monday and tell me what your hands look like. So that day I went out with him, and we went out to visit these farmers. We had 30, 40 bees, or their hives, bee hives, and they were raising blueberries. And anyway, got stung, didn't like it at all, didn't feel good at all. It hurt a little, actually.
So that was legit? That wasn't like a joke?
No, not a joke at all. So Monday morning, call me back. How do you, because otherwise I'd be too sensitive to that. Call me back. Look at your hands. So, well, I'm looking at them right now. They were pretty well swollen yesterday, but they're down a long way, so you're hired. So I passed the bee sting test. So all summer long, every day, I went out and inspected beehives for a bacteria disease for the Department of Agriculture of the state of Michigan. And then, so when I moved back to Washington, I thought, well, I'd like to raise bees myself and use them to pollinate my own garden and fruit trees. And so I did that. So I've had bees for a long period of time, and yeah.
How long have you had bees?
Well, I've had beehives for probably 30 years or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's the last couple of years, I've discontinued that simply because when I'm going to Yellowstone in the summertime, it's a little bit harder for me to take good care of them. But when I don't go back to Yellowstone anymore, whenever that is, I'm probably going to do it again. But it provides a lot of honey, love honey, and pollinate my own plants. So
now, you've also been into photography. Now, weren't you a photographer for the Parks Department?
Yeah, well, so that started about when I was in the 3rd or 4th grade. I got one of those little Kodak Brownie cameras. And I really started enjoying that photography. And I really have all the cameras I've ever had, maybe 30 of them or so in my home yet today. So by the time I got to high school, I started moving into the development of processing of film. So our high school had past our gym, kind of behind the stage in the old high school, we built a dark room there, and I spent a lot of time in the dark room developing pictures for our high school annuals. Then I went to college, and I got involved in the yearbook at college and their weekly newspaper there, and so we had a pretty nice dark room there, and I was kind of took charge of that thing, and so for 4 years I took thousands of pictures for the college yearbooks and so on. And then when I started teaching in Michigan, they built a darkroom there because they had a school newspaper journalism class and also their yearbook, and they wanted kids to learn how to do it. So then I did that, and then when I moved to Lynden, we built another darkroom in the high school and did that for one of the digital photography has changed all of that. So, so I was doing that for a long period of time. And in the summertime, we did slide programs every night in the amphitheaters. So I wanted to take my own pictures. We could get pictures from other places, so I started doing that. So I have thousands and thousands of pictures. I've digitized most of them. So all the pictures that I use in various programs I give, I take myself. So I've been involved in photography for probably almost close to 80 years now, and it's changed a lot in 80 years. So, got a few hobbies. Yeah. Right now I'm rebuilding a couple outboard motors, old motors that we've had a long period of time, and I also have another old car, my dad's 1968 Mercury, which I've worked on a lot and rebuilt the engine on that one and some things. So I like to work with my hands, mechanical things. I like to do that. So, and I have a shop that I can do it in.
You tried to retire once. I remember this was quite a number of years ago. You retired, and you were gonna get into like building log furniture or something, and you had enough of retirement, right?
So,
am I right about that?
Well, somewhat. Yes, I like to work with my hands, and I like log furniture. So I got some of the tools and logs, and so brought them back from National Forest legally. Got them, of course, and started working that. But I found out that I actually get more enjoyment or satisfaction out of working with kids in a lot of ways. So I had my regular classroom until about 6 years ago, and then I retired from that. I was the athletic director for 30 years, and I decided that I was going to stop doing that. But it became apparent pretty quickly to me that there's still a lot of work to do in the area of education and helping kids. So I kept on working in coaching and supervising athletic events and whatever. The new athletic directors wanted me to help with that. And I guess what I've learned is this. And this morning, as I said this morning when I was asked to make a short impromptu talk in a U.S. history class today, those kids have been so courteous and respectful. People ask me constantly, so how are the kids different today than they were when you started in the early 1960s? And in one sense, I'll say they're not different at all. Everybody wants to be loved and respected and affirmed by someone. Mm-hmm. That basic human desire has not changed. And I believe that so strongly. Kids today, in a lot of ways, are subject to things I never even heard of. Of course, we talk about AI today and all the social media stuff and so on. But beyond all of that, they still have those basic human needs. And working with kids and helping coach kids, and it's given me a lot of gratification. I will say right up front, and if other people like to do this, perfectly fine. There's a lot of people my age or whatever, that's what they like to do is they want to go on vacation somewhere. Nothing wrong with that, but I just want to go sit on a beach somewhere for a month, or go down to Arizona and play golf every day for 3 or 4 months, whatever. That's fine. It just doesn't work for me. I think if I were, that would be punishment for me to say that I had to go down somewhere. If I went to the beach somewhere, which I would always do, I'll go to a beach, but I'm not going to sit there. I'm going to walk around and look at the sand that's on that beach and try to find what animals are out there and what the rocks are made out of and so on. So I never even at all seriously considered retiring in the sense of moving to a place just to relax. I remember my dad saying to me when he was 82 years old, he wasn't old enough to go to the Senior Citizen Center yet. And I don't know that I'm old enough to go to that yet. But at my age, a lot of my classmates, of course, are gone. And each to their own. Each. I'm not saying this is what someone else ought to do. It's just for me, with my particular personality, my particular interest. So the retirement, I remember walking into one of the local hardware stores about 7 or 8 years ago, and a former student with a small child came up to me, and he was a student of mine a number of years before that. He says, "Oh, they tell me that you're using the word retirement." And he got right in my face and said, "You show me one place in the Bible where it uses the word retirement. Don't you even think about it." I still see that person in the community today. So I just, I enjoy being busy and doing things and trying to help whenever I can.
I see retirement coming soon, and I just don't see myself, at least I don't want to be sitting in front of a television after that.
Yeah.
I still want to be, making an impact to this world. So what kind of advice would you give to those, say, my age that see retirement in the next 10 years or something? And what should retirement or our later years look like?
Sure.
And because I think you're just a great example.
Well, it's a very fair question. So here's what I would strongly encourage people to do. So I'm involved in other stuff in the community, and I've been on the Yellowstone Park committee for like 30 or 40 years. And a couple of years ago, we started working on the schoolyard park, and we've developing that, continued to work on that. Find some organization or one or two or three in your community that need your expertise and volunteer to help there. That makes all the difference in the world. Some of the happiest retirees I know are people, I do Meals on Wheels on Wednesday, I work in a thrift store on Monday, I do such and such, and there's all kinds of opportunities in the area to do that. I Habitat for Humanity, you can many different organizations. So I would just say it'll keep the focus off yourself and your if you aren't feeling as good as maybe you were earlier, which is kind of normal. Well, now you're helping somebody else. You're not going to think about it so much. So if you want to stay away from the addiction to television or whatever, there are plenty of organizations, some political organizations, some environmental organizations, some salmon recovery organizations. There's all kinds of them. And you look in the volunteer section of the newspaper or whatever, they're all over the place. And
there's a big need for that too.
Oh, yeah. Yes, and you're doing something that's useful. That's useful. I think at some point in time, I believe that we're going to be asked to answer the question. So, what did you do with the time I gave you? God gave me 90 years. Okay, what'd you do with those 90 years? How much of that was directed to yourself or directed to other people? And I just kind of believe that pretty strongly. And my goal, it doesn't have to be everybody else's, but my particular goal is to stay involved as long as I possibly can and help in any way that I can. And you could do that. You have a lot of skills and the ability to meet people, utilize those in that kind of business. Some of my good friends are working on a regular basis at the Lynden Museum downtown and loving it. They meet people every day and they've had life experiences they can share with others. So I could spend a lot of time talking about that, but get involved, stay involved, and you'll live longer and you'll be more happy in what you're doing. And I just think that fits my style, and I suspect it would fit yours and a lot of other people.
Yeah, I think encouraging people to be like that is a good thing. So as we get close to wrapping up here, is there anything that you want to talk about, or that we didn't?
I guess I like your question. I guess I would say I think I'm one of the most blessed people on the human race there, in the sense that I've been given a lot of opportunities to work with lots of wonderful students and teachers and families in the area. And the respect that they've shown me is something that I don't even know how to quantify. When I spoke in chapel a couple of years ago, kind of sort of a farewell, sort of thank you, I meant it. It was kind of very emotional for me to actually say it, but I looked down at those 400 students, and I want to thank you for the way that you have respected me, and I respect you. It works both ways. People that don't have good connections, the kids don't feel they do respect them. So I've been so blessed with good health, been able to go to Yellowstone and for all these summers and work with people there, and all the hobbies involved. So, but my encouragement to everybody, just stay involved and be curious. Don't drive past a sign that says, historic site here without turning in. So my wife knew that I was kind of addicted to that, so she bought a big brass sign, which is installed in our basement, which says, at this place on October 31 in 1910, nothing happened.
Perfect.
and so when I walk downstairs and I see that sign, she's not with me anymore. She passed away a couple of years ago. I look at that sign, I remember, but it's a fun thing, because curiosity. Be a number 3. Don't be a number 1. Or I tell my kids, imagine a number 1 marrying another number 1, taking a trip somewhere. Nobody would say one word. You wouldn't be curious about anything. What a dull existence, So my goal is to get everybody to a 3, and life will be exciting.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so one last question. Since you've been a park, how many years as a park ranger?
53.
53 years as a park ranger in Yellowstone, and I'm sure you've worked with the Parks Department, besides just being a ranger. Mm-hmm. Is Bigfoot real?
Well, we haven't seen him in Yellowstone for at least 3 years, and then we don't have very good pictures of him. Every time we look for Bigfoot, we can never get good pictures. You think we've got these big, expensive telephoto lenses, we should be able to get a good picture of, but it's always just a little bit fuzzy, moving too fast, the light conditions are bad. So this summer, I'm hoping to go back and actually get some good pictures of Bigfoot.
Perfect. I look forward to seeing them.
Good.
Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Kredit. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you the best for another year in Yellowstone, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, I feel the same about you. Have a good day.
Well, that's a wrap here on Origin to Impact. Remember, your life matters. Make an impact today, no matter how small. Peace. Thank you.